What is your connection to DC?
Well, I was born and raised here in DC. My maternal great-grandparents came here from Orange County, Virginia. So they moved here, and of course, then my grandmother was the eldest of 13. And with her being the eldest of 13, so I think when they moved here, she may have even been either in the late teens or early 20s when all of them moved here. So when they moved here, if I'm not mistaken, they moved into a home together for a little while. And they did that for a couple of years, but then my grandmother was married. She met my grandfather, who was in the military. He was born and reared in Southwest DC. His mother was also born in Southwest DC. I'm not sure of all of her background, but I believe her mother was Jewish, a Jewish white woman, and then her father was a black man. But because of the racial times, she couldn't take care of the baby. Because, of course, my great-grandmother came out as black, a black child. So I think the father had someone to raise a black woman to raise my great-grandmother. I'm not sure if it was an aunt or a friend or what have you, whatever the case may be. But they were raised and reared here in DC in the Southwest area. When my great-grandmother and grandmother, was my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, my grandmother, and the youngest kids, my grandmother's youngest siblings. And when they came, they basically lived in the Northwest area. I think initially lived off of Gresham, I believe, off of Georgia Avenue. And then later on, they would move up to the Petworth area. My father, my family, who was definitely my family, his brothers, sisters, which would be my aunts and uncles and cousins, they were all over on the northeast side of town. Mm-hmm. And on that northeast side, I'm talking about River Terrace area, off of Benning Road, off of Florida Avenue. So they were in River Terrace. Well, first they were in Georgetown. Let me go back. They had homes and everything in Georgetown, DC. They later moved over to River Terrace, which is northeast DC, off of Benning Road. It was across from the Pepco power plant. And in between, so you had the Main Street, Benning Road, then you had the train tracks on the right, and you had, depending on which way you face it, and the river, the Anacostia River on the left. So it was like a little horseshoe type of community. And then later on, my grandmother, and that was my grandmother, my grandfather, and their kids, they had 10 children. They later on moved, my grandmother later on moved to, what's that, L Street or K Street Northeast off of Florida Avenue. And that's where the family house was. And then his brother and sister, my aunt and uncle, who I love dearly, who babysat me and everything, my aunt there, they had 8 kids who I'm very close to this day, whom I love, I just love immensely. And they the same, they looked out for me, they helped to raise me, look after me, they would babysit me, they would protect me, so that was that community. And I also was reared in River Terrace as well, on Blaine Street. So that's River Terrace Northeast. Howsoever, I was always between Northeast DC and Northwest because my grandparents and great-grandparents were up there. And that was every Sunday thing. Every Sunday we went up to grandma's house and we would go around to great-grandma's house and we went from there. So that's kind of how I came about in DC. And so, yeah, my father then was raised here and my mother both. So I think technically, especially from my mother, my maternal side, I think that's 4 generations. Mm-hmm.
So earlier you mentioned that on your maternal side, they moved to DC from Orange County,
Virginia.
Orange County, Virginia. Do you know where they were before Orange County, Virginia, or is that where they like land?
That was their area, Orange County, Virginia, as far as I was told, as related to my great grandparents. Now, as the story goes, my great grandmother, mother, and father, I think, lived in the Appalachian Mountains. My great grandmother's mother, I was trying to get the story right. She was, I think, a white woman that wore like combat boots. It looked like Lil Abner or something like that. You know, and my grandfather was a black man. Great grandfather was a black man, and she was white. So that's where you see kind of that mixture on that side. But then my great grandfather, his parents were like lighter skinned, but I think one of them was Indian, was Native American, if I'm not mistaken.
Which tribe?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do not know. I don't have that, so I'm not really sure. So I think his was black and Native American, and my great grandmother's parents was white and black.
So there are a couple of like interracial relations with like black and white, black and Native American. So have you heard any stories on like what it was like for them? Like, I guess, yeah, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so for the maternal side, so for my great grandmother's parents, my mother said that they would go visit them, that she could bake really well. They did a lot of farming and things like that. But as far as like interactions, it was good. You know, they didn't notice anything any differently. They didn't feel like it was any indifference in relating to them. But some of the things that they had to experience, I'm sure, was a little bit more intense, especially, I guess, in the Appalachia Mountains up in there. But these were folk that, what was the name of that family? Oh my gosh, like the Hillbillies, was that? So
I don't know what show.
That's oh my gosh, it'll come to me later. Okay. But anyway, but that type of mountains, you know, with the dress, the combat boots, the pipe. They were smart. Now I have to say that was a tobacco pipe. Now on my grandfather's side, my maternal grandfather, now that I mentioned because he meaning my great grandmother's father and biological mother, you know, they were sneaking, you know, as far as their relationship. They weren't loving out loud. This was, you know, behind closed doors, and then she ended up pregnant. But she knew that if she brought home a black child, that they would kill her, she felt, and definitely may have done harm to him and or the child. So, as this was still during the time of lynching, so they had to be very, very careful. And
it seems like your family, so they have been in Southwest, you have family in Southwest, Northeast, Northwest. You have
Southeast, yes.
Who you have in Southeast?
Yes, so my so my grandmother's sister and her husband and kids were mainly in Southeast. There were other family members in Southeast too, but they were the ones that spread greatly. My father's side of the family had sisters and their husbands and a couple of brothers over in the Southeast area too. So I was all over the place, but where I actually stayed as well, let me back up. As an adult, I lived in Southeast. But growing up, we definitely had family members in Southeast, and I enjoyed that. So I would go over there and visit. Mom would take me to go visit, and so on and so forth. And then one of my uncle's daughter's mother and grandmother lived over in Southeast, so I would go over there with them and visit. So I was in just about every quadrant within DC or connected to it in some way.
How would you describe like Orange County, Virginia? Like, have you been there?
No, but based on the descriptions that I received from my grandma, farmland. farmland. She grew up on a farm, so when she had here, of course, her garden was absolutely amazing. She had rose bushes. She loved different types of, it looked like something from a fairy tale. She liked various types of flowers. So she was very into gardening, like the bulbs that she would have to, do annually. She had to plant annually, cultivation of the soil. She was into this. Grandma, God bless her heart. She could cook so good, Jesus. And so could my mom. I mean, so they kind of passed that down. My great grandmother was the same way as far as like baking breads and things. I can imagine 13 children, their spouses and their children would come by on Sundays for breakfast and dinner. So this was a every Sunday thing. I can remember they had a well where they would go get fresh water, but that's where her love for gardening came from. And
so you said that you know how to cook. So what's your favorite dish to make that was passed down?
Lasagna. She made awesome lasagna. I mean, her lasagna is so good. So she taught me how to make that. But a lot of soul food dishes, fried chicken, fried pork chops, greens, green beans, macaroni and cheese. I'll make bread sometimes too, like rolls or biscuits or something like that.
What is your fondest memory or aspect about DC culture?
Oh my goodness, it was so beautiful and Black. Growing up in DC, was just surrounded by that's why they called it Chocolate City, right? And Black people were everywhere. But yeah, my doctors were Black. You go to the clinic, the nurses and the other staff, they were Black. My doctor had an office on the main strip of Benning Road. It was like a little business corner. He was there. The cleaners was owned by a Black man. The convenience store was owned by a Black man. And so that was it. The cab company we had right there, Black food everywhere. Bus drivers, Black food. I mean, you go to the, now sometimes when you go downtown shopping in certain stores, especially like the larger department stores, now you would see some white people in there. But most often you saw Black folk, because it was a thing. Every Saturday, my mother would take me downtown shopping. There was a Woolworth down there. And sometimes we would go to the Woolworth, right? And they had a diner inside of the Woolworth. So it was customary that sometimes after we finished shopping, Mom would then go to Woolworth, to get like household things. And I would love to buy dolls there. And they had like these plastic dolls, not like the thick Barbies, like that, because I had Barbies too. But going downtown shopping, the bus rides around town, and that was the culture of DC, small shops like food places. I can remember like Sporty's. Man, okay, so when you went to Sporty's was off of Benning Road too. And you would go there to get your half smokes. Burnt half smokes was a thing in DC. And I would get mine with mustard and onions. And you get French fries and they sold ice cream. So you had to get all of that. The convenience store, my godfather's convenience store, my mom, she was really good at making like tuna salads, potato salads. She could just cook, period. And so she would cook sometimes some of their half smokes and things like that. And she could make sandwiches. Look, she had me eating everything. See, that's why I'm so plump. Deliciously plump right now. It was this place called the Chef's Table, the Godfather's Pizza. But anyways, it was those playing outside as children, playing in the alleys, running around neighborhoods. You can run in your friend's house, run through the front door, just about run out the back door, playing in the backyards, recreation centers. So we had a lot of recreation centers in DC. So these were things that we did that brought us together as a community. And we did really have a community. People looked out for, it didn't matter if someone was mentally unstable. It didn't matter if they had a drinking problem, drug problem. People looked out for people. And Mom always taught me to respect my elders. So it didn't matter if it was someone who we may have considered today a drug addict or was homeless. When I saw them, it was Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so. It didn't matter if it was the nickname that we knew them by. It would be Mr. whatever that nickname was, Miss whatever that nickname was. And Mom told me early, she said, but for the grace of God, that could be you. You don't know what happened to them. You don't know what their experiences were that landed them in this situation. She said many times we're just a paycheck away from that. And sometimes people had tragic incidents in their lives that left them in a mental state. And this is what you see. So she said, you always have respect for people. And so that's why usually I'm having conversations with people from all walks of life, because that's just how my mother reared me. Until someone gives me a reason to not have respect, okay? Otherwise, so you felt safe no matter where I went, because there was family all over DC, clearly, you know. If I needed to reach out, I know that I would reach out. It was every time I went somewhere, I saw somebody who knew me or who knew my mom. And based on that alone, that was community, that was family, which meant that you were looked out for. That's what made, I think, DC so beautiful to be reared. You know, walking through the neighborhood, people yelling off their porches, saying hello and greeting you in the morning and in the afternoon, asking where your mom was or where your family member was. You know, they saw you doing something that they figured your mom would not appreciate, then they would be doing that, you know, hey, you better get on up the street, you know, or if somebody was meddling with you, they would intervene. So DC has such rich history in that way. Going to the different events in DC, talking about the libraries, and it was a beautiful place for kids to go, to get books, to have, you know, sometimes they would have readings there, but just if your parents just wanted to take you to the library, I mean, it was, you see, it was beautiful. And all there's some wild stuff happening in DC too now, you know, in and around drug epidemics, especially because you had the heroin and then you had, you know, the crack. And so you saw these different drug epidemics happen and how it impacted families. I mean, individuals, but those individuals are parts of families. How that impacted that, how it impacted parents and the relationships with their children. You see, you were able to see all of that, but still in the midst of all of that, there was so much love, so much support. My mom fed people in the community. It was like you never ran short. I mean, like if your electricity went out, man, they would run the cable from your house. Your neighbor would let them run and have an extension cord in their home until they got that back on. If you needed sugar, if you needed eggs, if you needed any of those things, they were so sharing. My aunt, who babysat me, who lived down the street, Mama, she be feeding everybody from the neighborhood. So many people were able to get meals because she had 8 kids, you know, and they would have these card circles. You know how they had like clubs. You would hear about women creating clubs to create camaraderie, to also unity, solidarity, and also just in the fight against white supremacy.
In DC, like, I guess, what inspired you to take action? And did you take action when you were young, or like, I was curious about that?
Because we were doing everything when we were young. I had a cousin that would take us to feed the homeless when I was young. So I was always involved in different things. Some of what we did at the recreation center, you know, things that my mom did personally. I saw her help a lot of people. I mean, a lot. And I think that is part of the help. A lot of times people look at movements, the big movements, but they don't look at the movements of what you see in community, the different things that people do. Feeding someone from your home when you know you were living paycheck to paycheck yourself and you have kids and things, but you are willing to take what you have and stretch it to share with another person or to help somebody make their rent. Okay, my mom did things like that. So that type of generosity and that spirit of wanting to help and care, I would have to say I definitely got that from, you know, from my mom and getting engaged. And I think some of the things that I experienced as a child made me want to get involved. When you see people you love in your community, like on drugs and stuff like that, that makes you want to do something to help them to have a better life, to actually get off drugs and get cleaned up and have better opportunities, better resources. You want to see the city provide things to kind of help people who may be in a rough spot in life. So that will put in you a spirit to want to help. And I'm just talking about all the different things that being a part of church. I don't know how I didn't mention that. Growing up in church, in the neighborhood church, Barrack and River Terrace, but I also would attend Catholic church with my grandmother uptown. And so they had bingo and all this other stuff, with the Catholic churches. So sometimes I would go with my grandfather, my mother, and them. They would go to bingo and help. And so I saw service in that regard, but I also saw it in the community churches. So whereas again, they had like drug ministries, they had ministry where they ministered to the homeless, where they ministered to other people in need, where they helped children and so on and so forth. So all these different things that helped to shape who I am as a person. And that led me to want to do more things to help fight for injustice. And mind you, growing up, I was not aware so much of racism because I was surrounded by black, but we were black from the schoolhouse to the church house to the home, okay? To the grocery store, everybody was black. So it wasn't this idea of racism. My first time experiencing racism was working at the Department of Justice. So that's when I started seeing racism. So then that's when my mom had to have more conversations with me about her experiences with racism, my grandparents' experiences with racism here in the city, what that looked like. And those are the things that start to move in your spirit. So you get to that point where those stories and those types of things, you become more and more aware of, we need to be more mindful of our surroundings and protecting ourselves and protecting our blackness and being proud about blackness, and not letting anyone take that from us. And as time would go on, and I would have my own experience here in DC, being in some of the white spaces in DC, which of course was government, though you had a lot of black workers, they were more in support staff, okay? My aunt, she worked for the Department of Justice. She was high in the Department of Justice. And so but still it was a support role, but it was supporting people of high caliber within that space. And so she talked about her experiences with racism, and hers was a lot, white males, white females, and sometimes even from some of your black mothers who look like you, experiencing those things, dealing with colorism. So all of those stories then mixed with my own experiences, seeing what I saw in my communities, wanting to make things better, then that started to move me, inspire me to do certain things. So one of the things that I loved, that I thought was very important growing up, was having access to books. We had book fairs. You can probably remember having book fairs in elementary school. And I also remember what type of exposure that was, to have exposure to books, to learn how to read, to learn to kind of get lost in worlds unknown because you're introduced to this new thing in a book. So I started wanting to do book fairs here in DC because I love education and I love books, and I wanted kids to have access to books, but with images that looked like them, with stories that relate to their own cultural experiences, right? That's positive and uplifting, because I started to see and realize that there was more outside of my black world that was imposing, that was, part of the oppression, the systemic oppression that's in our nations. And I thank God for the teachers at my elementary school who really tried their best to, even though they had their curriculum that they had to give us, they definitely implemented Black figures and things like that, especially Black History Month, at those times outside of that, to try to make sure that as we're passing through, going through K through 12 here in DC, that we was getting exposed to something. But still, it wasn't a lot. And so, so giving away free books to people in our community where it's expensive now. A child's book can cost $20, right? So getting those out there and getting those books into adults' hands as well, who may not have normally sat down maybe to read the book, or may just didn't have the funds. I mean, if your children got to eat, your children have to eat. you're not going to be buying a book. So being that bridge, to kind of bridge that gap and help close the gap, the education gap in DC, I was horrified to learn of the educational gap in DC. Okay.
Can you describe more about the educational gap in DC? And is this like during like young adult? Can you tell me like what time period?
Yeah, so I looked at that probably around 2011. Yeah, I was looking at this the stats from that, and I was totally shocked that there was like educational gap between blacks who were on the correct reading level, math level for their ages and grades compared to that of their white counterparts. And I couldn't understand how is that even possible. But when you have, especially in DC, how is this possible? How is it that a white child in a public school uptown is receiving more than the black child in the same system? DC not that big. You sneeze and you out of it, okay? I'm like, so a black child on the other side of town don't have those same resources when the money is taken from the same pot. So why are we getting quality teachers here in textbooks and facilities up on this end, but on this end, still the old textbook, ran down facilities? So you start to see over the years this change to try to push towards creating better schools and things like that and to try to equal it out. But then you had to watch the zoning thing, which is sometimes how they were able to keep things separate. That was something that made me have a desire and love, I think, for education even more. And I was like, one of the things to help with that is to get books into children's hands early and allow them to see the joy of reading and getting lost in new worlds and seeing themselves reflected. And I knew that it was definitely the right thing to do when I heard a child say to their mother, "Mommy, look, she looks like me." Immediately that child connects with that book. It becomes something of interest to her and she wants to open it up and read it, right? And I was just like, I know I'm doing the right thing here. So that really blessed me. And I wanted to make that happen for every child where they could come in. So that's what helped to inspire that. But then also, the challenges that we face economically. My family had challenges. So wanting to give food giveaways. So I've done that where I've done pizza giveaways in Northeast DC. And these were things I did on my own. And then there are things that I did with the church, of course. I've fed the homeless on my own, but I've also fed the homeless with the church. Clothes giveaways, doing things like that. Anything to help upbuild the community. For a long time in DC, we had Mayor Marion Barry, whom we love, who's like our mayor for life. He did so much for the seniors and for the youth. So those things are still near and dear to my heart because once my mom got up there in age and needed more assistance and support, I saw how little is available and out there for seniors. The help, you computerize, digitize everything. You think that everyone is supposed to know how to do that when they were born in this time, when those things did not exist. Even during their working years, they didn't necessarily have to deal with computers to this level. Technology has advanced, and yet you want them to come and, in order to get benefits or to do this, they got to go online. And I'm like, really? Or you have them on the phone for 5 hours to try to speak to one person and then get to the one person, they try to connect them to somebody else. So I'm seeing things like that. So that's how I really got involved in doing more and being in the community and being able to help people. I love being where the people are. I can remember while working at a church, I used to sit out on the front stoop. Before I even started working there, I would get there early and I would sit out on the front stoop and talk to those who had drug addiction issues, and they would come and sit and talk to me. And it ended up growing so much that they would be gathering on church that some of them started coming to the church and they wrestled with different things, alcoholism. And so you had those, and then many of them had HIV. So you saw many of them that were positive and struggling with that. diagnosis as well and their drug habit. So taking time to show them that I respect them, that I value who they are as a person, even though they're going through their challenges in life. So working at the church and working at a church that was on a main strip in DC really opened me up to even more, So, I definitely had the heart, but now I was really able to engage. Working with someone, the pastor, assigned me to work with a young lady that was addicted to drugs but was pregnant, to try to help her to limit her drug use and to get off drugs so that she could have a healthy pregnancy and just be able to raise her child, without having to wrestle with that. And that's what I did. And she had a healthy baby girl at the time. It's those things that change your world perspective. So this was the type of church that I was there where my hands were like deep in community. And I loved it. I love it. And I still love being in community. It's part of who I am. It's part of who we are as a people.
It's really fascinating to hear about how your family, your community, your church members really are like the instrumental influences in the work you do today. So we kind of have this time period of the 90s and 2000s where you kind of like got really involved. So do you see any like parallels in grassroots led movements in DC during the 90s and then right now in the 2020s?
That was during the time like we saw the Million Man March during that time frame, I think, which was magnificent because you really saw how impactful that was, and to see all these Black families and these Black men coming from all over the United States to come here to DC for this march. I could think about the unveiling of the MLK monument, different things, that were just important to the Black community, but that type of grassroots movement. So I don't know if we see that same level of passion and gathering today that I remember from that time. The Nation of Islam was very effective in, their ministry, of course, their discipleship, but that being able to bring people together, I can remember them. And all of this was part of it. Grassroots, going into communities, helping with the drug epidemics and cleaning up neighborhoods. They would do this, right? But nonetheless, to see them do that in communities, Black communities throughout the U.S. built network, that's grassroots. That's at the grassroots level. So when it was time for them to mobilize and do something like a Million Man March, that became easy. You know why? Because people respected them and they respected their work. They knew what they were capable of. From the days of Malcolm X, a lot of people, of course, were very, especially Black men, just very respectful of Malcolm X. They admired his strength, and the mistreatment of Black folk. They loved the Black Panthers for the same thing, right? They loved the civil rights movement for standing up and having to deal with it. And I think they saw that with the Nation of Islam, and it was interfaith. And I love that. So many Black churches also became a part of that to say, and so this is the work that they were doing, dealing with people in the prison ministries with them. This is network. This is grassroots at its best, because what happens is people don't forget most often those who helped them or where they saw strength in that or support in community. So when it came time, man, to see the churches get together, the temples and the synagogue, everybody was getting involved, and that made a difference. And so that's important grassroots work. Also, I would say with the church, also beyond the Million Man March and stuff like that, and the type of mobilization or grassroots works that led to that type of mobilization and organizing, right? You also had churches, Black churches, man, made up of what? Black people, Black families. And so that was community there, but the way that they would connect to the Catholic churches in the area or the Hebrew congregations in the area, you name it, the Episcopalian, things like that, they didn't mind. And then they got together and did it on a wider scale, like with the city. You see what I'm saying? All of this was grassroots networking. So when there were movements or things that needed to happen, people would show up. People would come out to speak. They would come out and lift up their voices as it related to certain things. So you seeing how important these connections within community are helping people to overcome various obstacles, getting jobs. Okay, people might say, "Oh, that's not." This is grassroots work. I'm in an interview. Somebody sees that I worked in a certain place, and they was like, "Oh, you went to this person's church, Oh, okay, no, she good. Y'all gotta make y'all decision, but for me, she good because a person that would come under that, and that person would allow them to use them as a reference. I already know, and they work for them for this period of time. Oh no, you don't have to tell me, and I know everything I need to know." That's grassroots work, because that's how connections and networks are made, and that means something. But that's because of the work that that person was doing in community. And so I see people involved now, but I don't see the same type of unity that I saw.
On that point, you said that you don't see as much like passion and gathering, as not much unity. Why do you think that is during like the 2020s?
While social media devices and things like that make things, we get access quicker to information and all these other wonderful things, but it also creates isolation and individualism. People don't communicate like they used to. That has created a large problem with our being able to unify in ways that I think would be more effective in seeing that level of passion. All these electronic devices, they absorb our attention, and it causes us to disconnect. So we got a lot of things we have to work on. It would be great if kids could be outside and have these recreational experiences. And I think the more, like in these gentrified, like with DC, and DC becoming more gentrified right now, and this aggressive gentrification, you have more families that are being locked out of the economy. You have places, housing has become way more expensive. Now you paying almost $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. What? And they put all these fake amenities in there and like, oh, this is going to make you want to pay more. No, but you're locking people out of the economy. You wonder why homelessness has gone up. Who can afford $2,000? Who's making maybe $2,000 a month, and other bills and things you have to pay? It's not reasonable. I've seen whole neighborhoods change, and now people can't afford to live in them. I'm all for development and making things nice and better. I love beautiful things. I love nice things. I think most people do. But somebody having a job making what, $10 or $12 an hour, and now you want them to pay $2,000 rent, and they got 2 kids, and that's for a 1-bedroom? What are they going to do? They can't survive like that. So, and you're talking about, these are not even 2-parent homes. If it's a single parent, it's even worse. So
you mentioned like gentrification, housing insecurity, food insecurity, rise of individualism. So how would you describe the state of DC and the state of like the movements here?
I don't think it's good. The state of DC is not good. I think overall, there has been allowed too much development and not enough investing in people. And I think that's what I miss, and I think that's what people loved about Mayor Marienberry, that he invested in the people. Part of investing in the people is development, right? But it's affordable development, okay? And right now, this isn't affordable development. So whenever you don't have affordable development, you create economic crises for people, which leads to social crises, right? It's so much work to be done. Pathways to prison isn't the answer. We're looking for opportunities to get people back acclimated who were in prison, to get them home and working and doing the positive environment. But we also looking for opportunities for kids to have other things to do in the city. okay, that will help build them up, because the more they're conscious, the more that they're aware, the more they're not overwhelmed by their existential crisis, economic crisis especially, then they can focus on other things. But as long as they consume with that, that's all they can see. They can't see anything else, you know? So I think it's important to create opportunities, and I think it's important for them to know who they are as far as Black folk. Kids knowing their African ancestry is so important. Knowing their Black history just based on the United States alone and what has happened here. But they have to know that our point of entry is not slavery. They have to understand pre-colonial Africa. They have to understand Africa before enslavement, okay? We know that colonialism comes after that, but these shifts, this is one of the reasons why I created, and worked with Dr. Kumar, and I thank him for his leadership and allowing me the importance of an HBCU in a city such as DC, creating opportunities for children, for youth, especially high school youth, to learn about Africa, to learn about their history, because it's part of, first of all, the world that we live in, in this geopolitical space, and us becoming more connected, learning how to be global leaders, global citizens, right? So I think every HBCU across this country should definitely have programs for youth to make sure that they are creating pathways to success, pathways to opportunities, pathways that will help them to have a leg up in this country, in life, and around this globe. We have to do better at that. And so it's very important to create pathways for people to become decolonized, right?
You mentioned Dr. Kumar, and that you do work with him, and you mentioned you do work with high schoolers. Can you tell me briefly about a couple of exciting things you're doing in the community in DC?
Yeah, so I've mentioned some of them, but the African Studies Summer Leadership Institute at Howard University, that is one of the programs which is dynamic because it allows college graduate and undergraduate students to work with DC youth, teaching them about Africa, the African geography, African history, African culture, and African current affairs, but then also teaching them leadership skills, teaching them confidence, allowing them to do research and presentations during the summer. It's a dynamic program. I really love it. I love the curriculum that we mapped out and everything for this. And it really gives students an alternative for the summer. It gives the parents, an opportunity for their child to engage in something that is uplifting, rewarding, and that is an investment in who they are as a person that will help them level up in the future. And I think this is very important for DC youth, and Howard is a premier HBCU, right? And with that being the case and it being here in the city, it definitely should have partnerships and actually be able to connect to the kids. There should be this mutual respect and love between Howard University and DC's community, especially the youth. So that's one of the things. I've mentioned the book fairs that I do annually. This time I'm trying to focus on kids with autism, at least to make sure that they are included in that, in the book fair, to make sure we have some books that speak to that. I hope to be doing more things in the future that will allow me to be in community and create amazing opportunities for our youth. I want to always put in their hands something that they can use to make their life better and to make other people's lives better and to build better societies and communities for themselves. Again, we're builders. This is creators and innovators. This is what we do. And I want to give them that opportunity to, I want to give them the opportunity to see the greatness within themselves. I always say this, that it's not even as an educator, it's not about me pouring into someone else. It's about me pulling out of them what's there. Okay? Because I think once they see that greatness, then they understand. And my other thing is, I love what I do and I love who I do it for.
So can you talk more about like what makes you excited and hopeful about the future of DC?
The people, I think the people who were here, that community, generations of people who have lived in DC, who really love DC and want to see it grow and prosper. But I also think part of the new, that's part of creating community, right? Is learning to embrace and accept those who are different than you are, right? And creating the various different cultures represented in that. And having those communities here, but having that partnership. I think I am hopeful in the sense that people who operate like that they do live here in the city. And if it just continues to be this racial dynamic and change without these conversations in and around people's humanities, access to opportunity, housing security, food security. If we can't have those conversations, then my hope is not good. It'll be where it's been in Jesus, honey, until until the great coming. I guess, till the second coming, till the trumpet sounds. I guess that's what we'll be. But I think I am hopeful that we will see some changes, but some of this community building that I'm talking about is necessary. We can't be in silos if we want it to work. Can't do it.